Chapter 1. You were never supposed to know. You were never supposed to know. Marcus Alton said, his voice controlled but cracking under the pressure. The tension hung thick in the dining room like steam off a boiling pot. A storm rolled somewhere far off in the distance, but inside the Alton estate, it had already broken. Rowan stood at the end of the table, eyes burning, breath shallow. The room around her blurred. The crystal, the gleaming silverware, the tasteful floral arrangements Juliet always insisted on, even for family dinners. All of it suddenly felt hollow, artificial. A set piece in a story she never agreed to star in. I wasn't supposed to know what, exactly? Rowan's voice was sharp. Too loud. That I'm not who I thought I was? That my life was a curated exhibit you let me walk through with a blindfold on? Caleb flinched beside her, fork clattering against his plate. Aunt Miriam's mouth opened, then closed. Juliet Alton, always poised, always composed, pressed a napkin to her lips, hiding the tremor in her hands. Marcus didn't sit. He towered at the head of the table like he always had, statuesque, composed, untouchable. But tonight, even he couldn't fake indifference. This is not the place for this discussion, he said. His voice was low, threatening. Rowan took a step closer, her heels clicking against the marble. Then what is the place? When would you have told me? On your deathbed? In a letter slipped under my door? Or never? He looked her in the eyes, cold and direct. You were a child. You were given everything. A name, a future, a legacy. There was no reason to confuse you. No reason to confuse me? I'm not confused. I'm furious. Her voice cracked, her hands shaking at her sides. You told me you were my father.
I'm your father,
he snapped. No, you're a man who raised me with a lie. Juliet stood then, moving to place a hand on Rowan's arm, but Rowan stepped away. Don't touch me. You could have told me. You could have stopped him. Juliet's lips quivered. I wanted to. Every year, every birthday. But he... She chose stability, Marcus interrupted. She chose what was best for you. Stop saying it was for me! Rowan nearly screamed. It was for you! For your reputation, for your precious name. Aunt Miriam's voice broke through the silence. Rowan, please wait. Rowan turned to her. Did you know? Miriam looked down at her plate. You all knew, Rowan whispered. Everyone at this table. You looked me in the eyes for 28 years and let me believe I belonged.
You do belong,
Caleb said softly.
No, I don't,
Rowan said. Her eyes went back to Marcus. Who was he? Marcus hesitated. Juliet closed her eyes. His name was Daniel Green, Rowan continued for them. Wasn't it? Silence. Marcus's jaw tensed. He was the driver, the help, and that's all he ever would have been.
You mean my father was the help? Biology doesn't make a father.
No, but it makes a truth. And you buried mine. She turned away, eyes burning. You were never supposed to know, he'd said. And now she did? And nothing?
Nothing would ever be the same again.
Chapter 2. The Alton House. The Alton estate was the kind of house people whispered about when they drove past it, slowing down just enough to catch a glimpse through the wrought iron gates. White brick, black shutters, a sweeping circular drive framed by manicured boxwoods, and a front door so wide it looked like it could swallow a horse-drawn carriage. It had stood on Westwood Hill for 4 generations, perched high above the town with the kind of posture only old money could afford. Rowan had grown up in that house, but she had never quite felt at home in it. The ceilings were too high, the silence between rooms too dense. It was the kind of silence that didn't make space for emotions, only expectations. As children, she and Caleb had been discouraged from running in the halls or raising their voices. They were to be polite, pristine, well-educated. They were to smile at the staff but never ask too many questions, especially not about the people who once worked there and left without notice. Now, the house felt colder than ever. She stood in the entryway alone that evening, after everyone had scattered, Caleb to his car, Juliet to her wine, and Marcus likely to his study where the door was always shut unless he wanted it open. Rowan ran her fingers over the wallpaper in the front hallway, the same blue and cream toilet pattern that had lined those walls since she was a toddler. She remembered once peeling a piece of it back behind the grandfather clock when she was 6, thinking she'd find a secret passageway. She found dust, plaster, and a slap on the wrist from a nanny who wouldn't meet her eyes afterward. Her fingers paused at a framed portrait halfway up the staircase. Marcus, Juliet, Caleb, and herself. Rowan at age 10, sitting stiffly in a white dress. Juliet's hand hovered above her shoulder in the photograph, not quite touching. Marcus's gaze wasn't on the camera, he was looking off to the side, jaw clenched. Rowan stared at the photo for a long time before taking it off the wall. Behind it, the wall was clean. No safe, no hidden letter, nothing. But the cracks were showing elsewhere. Later that night, in her old bedroom, Rowan opened the drawers of her childhood desk. School awards, dried-out pens, a crumpled note from middle school. She pulled out an old yearbook and paused at a faded black-and-white photo tucked inside. A man, early 30s maybe, standing beside a classic town car, smiling. There was a name scribbled on the back in looping handwriting. Daniel G. She flipped it over again, her chest tightening. She had found this photo years ago in a shoebox buried in a closet downstairs. She'd asked Juliet about it. Her mother had smiled and said, just an old friend of the family. Rowan had believed her. Why wouldn't she? Now, looking at it again, the resemblance was unmistakable. The curve of his mouth, his nose, the way his eyes slanted when he smiled. She looked nothing like Marcus. She had said that once as a teenager, offhandedly during a family dinner. Everyone laughed.
You take after your mother,
Juliet said quickly, and Marcus had changed the subject. But now she knew. Daniel Green wasn't a distant memory. He was her beginning. The knock on the door was soft.
Come in,
she said. It was Caleb. He stood in the doorway, hands shoved in his jacket pockets, his expression unreadable.
I just wanted to see if you were okay,
he said. Rowan leaned against the desk.
I'm not.
He nodded, stepping into the room but keeping his distance.
I didn't know. Not until last year.
Her head snapped up.
What?
I overheard Mom and Dad fighting about it. I didn't want to believe it. So I didn't ask.
You should have told me.
I thought, if I ignored it, it might not be real. Rowan gave a bitter laugh.
That's the Alton family motto, isn't it?
Caleb looked pained. I don't know what to say. She stared at him. Say his name. Caleb hesitated. Then quietly, Daniel Green. Rowan nodded. That's a start. The house creaked around them, the same groan it had made every night for years. But tonight it sounded different, like it was finally starting to let go of a truth it had kept hidden too long. Chapter 3. The Man in the Photograph. The morning after the confrontation, Rowan drove across town to the east side, where the streets narrowed and the sidewalks cracked. She hadn't been there in years, maybe since high school. The houses here didn't have gates or imported fountains. They had front porches with chipped paint, mailboxes that leaned slightly forward like they'd given up standing straight. Miriam's house was small but warm, with a wraparound porch and hanging baskets full of half-wilted geraniums. Rowan had always liked it there. As a child, she remembered sneaking into Miriam's pantry for ginger snaps and watching black and white films in the den while her aunt hummed along with the score. Miriam opened the door before Rowan could knock. Her hair, always in a neat twist, had come loose around her ears. She looked older than Rowan remembered. More tired. More human.
I was wondering when you'd show up,
Miriam said softly. Rowan swallowed. I need answers. Miriam opened the door wider. Then come in, sweetheart. Inside, nothing had changed. The same china hutch, the same green couch, the same smell of lemon polish and lavender. Miriam poured tea without asking and handed Rowan a cup before settling into the armchair opposite her.
I found the photo,
Rowan began, holding it up, in one of the old boxes. I didn't realize it then, but that's him, isn't it? Daniel. Miriam didn't look at the picture. She didn't have to. Yes. Rowan exhaled. He's my father.
Yes,
Miriam said again, with a gentleness that made Rowan's eyes sting.
Why did no one ever tell me?
Miriam stirred her tea slowly.
Because your mother was afraid. And your grandfather, Marcus,
he wasn't just afraid, he was furious.
But why?
Because Daniel wasn't from our world, Miriam said. He was a working man. Came from a long line of mechanics and drivers. His father used to fix our family cars. When Daniel was 23, he took the job as our personal driver. That's when he met Juliet. Rowan sat forward, heart thudding. She loved him, didn't she? Miriam gave a bittersweet smile. Completely. Quietly. In that house, love like that didn't belong.
They were together?
For over a year, Miriam said, sneaking around like teenagers. They'd drive up to the mountains, to the lake. Juliet talked about leaving everything behind.
So what happened?
Miriam hesitated, then set her tea down. Marcus happened. He caught them. There was an explosion. A screaming match. Juliet begged him to let her go, but Marcus wasn't about to let the Alton family fall into scandal. He threatened Daniel, pressured Juliet, said he'd cut her off if she didn't end it, and she gave in. She was 20, alone, afraid. She didn't see a way out. Rowan's throat tightened. And then I came along. Miriam nodded.
She didn't know she was pregnant at first. When she found out, she wanted to leave to raise you with Daniel.
But Marcus had already arranged everything. The moment she told him, he filed legal papers, paid off a judge, had your birth certificate amended to list him as the father.
He bought my name,
Rowan said, her voice hollow.
He bought your story,
Miriam said softly. And Juliet... She broke.
I've never seen her smile the same way since.
Rowan sat in silence, the pieces clicking together like broken glass refitted into a frame. What happened to Daniel? Miriam looked down. He left town. Marcus made it clear he'd never be allowed near you. There were rumors he went north, started over somewhere in Tennessee or Kentucky. He wrote letters to Juliet.
For a while. Did she answer them? She burned them.
Rowan's breath caught.
Why? Because she couldn't bear to hope.
She stood up, walking over to the mantel where an old jewelry box sat. Miriam opened it and pulled out a small envelope.
This is the only letter she didn't burn. I kept it.
Rowan took it with shaking hands. The paper was yellowed, the handwriting neat but rushed.
Jules, I will always love you. I will always wait. If you ever decide to choose your heart over your name, I'll be here. Tell our daughter, if she ever needs me, I want her to find me.
Dee Rowan closed her eyes. The weight of it was unbearable. He wanted to know me. He still might, Miriam said gently. But it's been a long time. People change. People disappear.
I don't care.
I need to find him. Miriam nodded slowly.
Then start with the truth. And don't let your father rewrite it again.
Rowan stood, clutching the letter to her chest. She wasn't just someone who had been lied to. She was someone who had been claimed without consent, branded by a name that was never truly hers. But now? Now she had a choice. And she was done being silent. Chapter 4. Truth and Paper. The county clerk's office was tucked into a red brick building near the courthouse, a place Rowan hadn't stepped into since applying for her first driver's license at 16. Back then, she was just another well-dressed teenager from a powerful family, breezing through forms and signatures with the confidence of someone who'd never been denied anything. But this time, the stakes were different. This time, she wasn't here to prove her identity, she was here to challenge it. The fluorescent lights buzzed above as she waited in line, clutching the letter from Daniel Green in her coat pocket like it might evaporate if she let it go. When her number was called, she stepped up to the glass partition where a woman in her 60s adjusted her glasses and offered a practiced smile.
Name? Rowan Alton,
she said. Her voice sounded different, like it belonged to someone older.
Date of birth? May 2nd, 1997.
The woman began typing, then paused. Do you need a copy of your birth certificate?
Yes. The original, please.
The woman glanced up. Originals aren't typically requested. You'll need to fill out a form and sign a release. Rowan nodded, already reaching for the pen. I understand. 15 minutes later, the clerk returned with a file folder. There are 2 certificates under your name, she said, brows furrowed. One dated May 2nd, 1997. The other filed in November of the same year, marked as amended.
Do you want copies of both?
Rowan's heart stilled. Yes, she said. Both. She took the manila envelope, hands trembling slightly, and walked to a quiet corner of the office near a vending machine. She sat down, the thin plastic seat digging into her back as she carefully unfolded the documents. The first certificate was straightforward. Rowan Elise Green. Born at 7:08 a.m. Mother. Juliet Alton. Father. Daniel Green. His name was typed in neatly, beside a modest occupation. Chauffeur. Her breath caught in her throat. That was the truth. That was her. Then she opened the second. Rowan Elise Alton. Same date, same hospital. Mother. Juliet Alton. Father. Marcus Alton. The amendment note read corrected to reflect legal paternity per court order. No reason, no explanation, just cold, bureaucratic reshuffling. She stared at the 2 documents side by side, the ink on each one telling a different version of her life. The first, raw and honest. The second, curated, adjusted, sanitized. It wasn't just a name. It was a theft. A quiet one, legally executed, socially protected. Marcus had rewritten her. And for what? To preserve his image? To own her? She folded the certificates back into the envelope and walked out into the sunlight, squinting at how bright the day was for a world that had just fallen apart again. Back in her car, she took a photo of the original certificate and texted it to Caleb with no explanation. The 3 dots appeared. Then Jesus. I had no idea it was this official. Then are you okay? She didn't answer. She couldn't explain what it felt like to hold a version of her life she'd never lived. A name she never got to wear. A father she'd never known but who had wanted her. Chosen her. Back at the Alton estate, she found Juliet in the solarium, reading the society pages like nothing had changed. She held her teacup the same way she always did, pinky extended, back straight, ankles crossed. Rowan stood in front of her, silent. Juliet looked up, blinking. Rowan, you're home early. Rowan said nothing. She pulled the certificate from the envelope and laid it on the table beside the untouched scone. Juliet stared at it. Her hand reached for the page but stopped. You knew, Rowan said. You signed it. Juliet's face remained frozen, except for a single tremor in her chin. He made me.
You could have fought.
I tried, Juliet said quietly. But your grandfather threatened to cut me off. He said he'd take you away. I didn't have a choice.
Yes, you did. You just didn't choose me.
Juliet flinched. It wasn't that simple. Rowan's voice sharpened.
Then make me understand. Because right now, all I see is a woman who signed her daughter's truth away.
Juliet pressed her lips together, the perfect image of composure cracking. You wouldn't have had the life you did otherwise. The schools, the opportunities, the safety. I didn't need a life that wasn't mine. I needed you to be honest. Juliet looked down at the birth certificate again, tears welling in her eyes.
I held you in my arms and I knew you were Daniel's,
she whispered. But I told myself that protecting you meant becoming someone else, pretending that your life started the moment Marcus claimed you.
But I'm not his,
Rowan said.
And I never will be.
Juliet didn't speak. And for the first time in her life, Rowan walked away from her mother without looking back. Chapter 5. The Dinner Party. Marcus Alton had always been a master of presentation. Image, reputation, control. These were his languages, and he spoke them fluently. The Alton Foundation's annual charity dinner was his favorite stage, and this year's event, held in the ballroom of the Alton estate, was meant to be his triumph. The guest list had been curated months in advance. State senators, judges, CEOs, old money neighbors with multi-generational names and carefully polished smiles. The wine was imported, the catering provided by a Michelin-starred chef from Charleston. Photographers from the local press hovered politely near the hedges, waiting for the perfect shot of the Altons standing beneath the chandelier. Rowan wasn't on the guest list, but she came anyway. She arrived just before dinner service, wearing a sharp crimson gown that cut through the sea of navy suits and champagne dresses like a warning flare. Heads turned as she stepped through the arched entrance, chin high, gaze unwavering. Some guests whispered, "But others stared." Too long. Everyone noticed. Juliet spotted her from across the room and moved to intercept, panic flickering behind her composure.
Rowan? What are you doing here?
She hissed, gripping her daughter's arm as though that might stop the momentum. Making a contribution to the evening, Rowan said coolly, easing out of her mother's grip.
You don't understand. There are donors here. People who...
I understand perfectly, Rowan said, brushing past her. Marcus stood near the bar, mid-conversation with the state commissioner, when he saw her. His face shifted, just slightly. A tick in the jaw, a narrowing of the eyes. It was the only warning she got. Dinner was served minutes later. The long banquet table gleamed beneath the chandelier, rows of crystal glasses catching the light like prisms. Conversations hummed around duck confit and asparagus risotto. A string quartet played in the corner. Rowan waited until dessert was served. She stood. Glasses clinked. Conversations died mid-sentence.
I want to thank everyone for being here tonight,
she began, her voice carrying easily over the soft music. Your generosity supports programs that help children in need, and that's admirable. Marcus sat frozen. Juliet's hand hovered over her glass like she wanted to vanish inside it. Caleb, seated 2 chairs down, stiffened.
But since we're all here to celebrate family legacy,
Rowan continued, I thought it was the right time to share a personal truth of my own. Marcus spoke, low and sharp.
Rowan, sit down.
She turned to face him. No. A stunned silence fell over the room.
For 28 years,
she said, facing the guests again. I believed Marcus Alton was my father. I carried the Alton name, lived in the Alton house, was shaped by Alton expectations. Someone cleared their throat. A fork dropped.
But recently, I discovered that my biological father is a man named Daniel Green. He worked for the family when I was born. There was a collective gasp.
One woman murmured, Oh my God. Rowan held steady.
When my mother gave birth to me, my real father's name was quietly removed from my birth certificate. A judge was paid, a lie was installed in its place, and I grew up wearing a name that was never mine to begin with.
Juliet covered her mouth. Marcus's voice sliced through the silence.
That's enough. No, Rowan snapped. It's not even close.
He stood. This is not the time or place for this.
Then when would be? When it's convenient for you? When no one's looking?
Her voice rose.
The truth isn't polite, Dad. It doesn't wait for a schedule.
A senator looked from Marcus to Rowan, deeply uncomfortable. A woman at the end of the table stood quietly and left.
I'm not telling this story to shame you,
Rowan continued. I'm telling it because it belongs to me, and I'm done pretending that silence is the same as dignity. Marcus's face was stone.
I'm changing my name,
she added, softer now, legally, publicly. I am Rowan Green, and for the first time, I finally feel like myself. The silence in the room was deafening, then slow, tentative applause. One guest, then another. A few more joined in. The room was fractured, half stunned, half moved, all changed. Rowan stepped back from the table and turned. Juliet reached for her as she passed, whispering, "Please? Don't do this like this." Rowan looked her mother in the eye. "You had every chance to do it differently." And then she walked out, past the shocked stares, past the photographers still outside, past the columns and gravel paths. Her heels clicked against the stone like punctuation marks. She didn't look back. Not once. Chapter 6. The Divide. The fallout came faster than Rowan expected. By morning, the local news had picked up the story. Someone had recorded her speech on their phone and leaked it online. The clip had gone viral on social media not just because of the scandal, but because of how calm and unapologetic she'd been. The headlines were a mix of curiosity, admiration, and thinly veiled judgment. Heiress rejects Alton name at charity gala. Rowan Green. A daughter's public break. Beneath the legacy. Alton family secrets exposed. At first, Rowan didn't read the articles. She kept her phone on silent, ignoring most calls and messages. But she couldn't avoid the reactions forever. The foundation issued a statement through Marcus. The Alton family remains committed to its philanthropic mission and wishes to respect Rowan's personal journey, though we strongly believe such matters should be handled privately, with grace and discretion. Rowan laughed bitterly when she read it. Grace and discretion. Those were Marcus's favorite weapons. That afternoon, she returned to the estate to pick up some personal documents. The guard at the gate looked at her with something like pity in his eyes. Caleb was waiting for her in the foyer.
You should have warned me,
he said. Rowan pulled her coat tighter around her. I didn't want to give anyone the chance to talk me out of it.
You ambushed him.
She looked at him. I told the truth. In front of people who've only ever heard his version. Caleb exhaled. You think I don't understand what you're feeling?
No,
she said, walking past him. I think you've spent your entire life benefiting from a lie, and now that it's unraveling, you're afraid of what that means for you. He flinched. That's not fair. Neither is growing up in a house that turned my father into a ghost. Caleb followed her to the study. He raised you. He raised an idea of me, not the real me.
Does it really change who you are?
It changes everything. He paused. What about Mom? Rowan stopped at the doorway. She had a choice. She made it. She didn't have power. She had more than she used. They stood there for a moment, the air between them tight with years of unspoken truths.
I just don't want to lose my sister,
Caleb said finally. Rowan softened. You won't. but I'm not going to keep pretending to be who they need me to be. She stepped into the study. Marcus wasn't there, but his presence was everywhere. The leather chair, the untouched decanter of scotch, the perfectly aligned bookshelves. On the desk was a manila folder. Her legal name change application, neatly clipped. He had signed it. She stared at the signature. Cold, tidy. Marcus Alton. A man who didn't raise his voice but controlled entire rooms with the tilt of his head. She picked up the document and left the study without a word. Later that night, Juliet called.
I didn't know it would feel like this, she said quietly. This final.
It doesn't have to be final, Rowan said, but I'm not going to carry someone else's story anymore. Juliet was silent for a long time. Then, with a cracked voice,
What will people say?
I'm not doing this for people, Mom. I'm doing it for me. Juliet didn't argue. And maybe that was progress. The next morning, Rowan sat in the county courthouse, waiting for her number to be called. Around her, people whispered, glanced, pretended not to recognize her. When her number was called, she stepped forward. I'm here to finalize my legal name change, she said. The clerk smiled. Your new name, please? Rowan took a breath. Rowan Elise Green. It didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like coming home. Chapter 7. The letter. The letter arrived 3 days after Rowan's name change was finalized. No return address, no postage stamp, just her name. Rowan Green, handwritten on the envelope in blocky, unpracticed script. It was left at her apartment door, tucked under the welcome mat like a secret hoping not to be noticed. For a moment, she thought it might be from Juliet. Or Marcus. One last attempt to pull her back into the fold. But when she picked it up, her hands started to shake. She recognized the handwriting. She'd seen it once before, in the letter Miriam had given her weeks ago, the one Daniel Green had written to Juliet nearly 30 years ago. The same strong, uneven lettering. The same hard-pressed ink. She stood there, barefoot in the doorway, staring at the envelope until her neighbor passed by and smiled awkwardly. Back inside, she sat on the edge of the kitchen counter and opened it. There was only one page. The same faded stationery as before. A soft scent of cedar clung to it, like old trunks in summer cabins.
Rowan, I wasn't sure if I should write. It's been too long, and I have no right to your time, your life, or your forgiveness. But when I saw your name in the paper, your real name, I knew I had to try. I've thought about you every day since you were born. Not in some abstract poetic way. Literally, every single day. Wondering if you liked dogs or cats, if you danced or ran track, if you hated Brussels sprouts like I did. Wondering if your smile looked like your mother's or mine. I wanted to be there. I begged to be. But they made it clear. If I stayed, I'd ruin you. So I left, and I let the lie breathe. I told myself it was noble, but it wasn't. It was cowardice too. But what you did? Standing up at that dinner, saying your truth in front of the world? That wasn't cowardice. That was strength. You've got more of it than I ever did. If you don't want to respond, I understand. But I live upstate now, in a little cabin on Lake Marion. If you ever want to meet, not as a daughter meeting her father, but as one human finally seeing another, I'd like that. I am proud of you, no matter what you decide. Dee read the letter 5 times before she set it down. And then she cried. Not because she was broken, or angry, or even lost, but because somewhere in the world there was a man who had waited her whole life just to see her name in ink. A man who had loved her quietly from the margins. Later that night, Rowan drove without telling anyone where she was going. She passed the Alton estate, windows glowing with carefully arranged light. She didn't stop. She parked outside Miriam's house and climbed the porch steps. Miriam opened the door in a robe, hair pinned back with a clip. I knew you'd come,
she said, stepping aside. Rowan held out the letter. He wrote me. Miriam took it, read it once, and looked up with eyes full of something between sorrow and awe. So what will you do? Rowan stared out at the dark trees lining the street. I think I'm going to go. Miriam nodded slowly. He deserves that much. Rowan glanced back at her. Do I? Miriam smiled, soft and sure. You deserve everything. Back at home, Rowan packed a small bag, just a weekend's worth of clothes, a journal, a copy of her newly reissued birth certificate, and the letter. Before she left, she texted Caleb. Gone for a few days. I'm okay, he replied almost instantly. Take your time. Proud of you. She smiled. For the first time in her life, there was no script, no perfect image, no expectations waiting on the other side of the drive. Only the truth. And she was finally ready to follow it wherever it led. Chapter 8. The Name She Wore. Lake Marion was smaller than Rowan expected. Tucked behind a curve of pine trees and framed by soft hills, it didn't appear on most road maps. There were no resorts, no tourist signs, just a quiet, glimmering body of water and a scattering of cabins, most of them with chipped paint and aging decks. It was the kind of place you ran to, not vacationed in. The kind of place you chose when you'd stopped running from others and started running back to yourself. Rowan sat in her car at the end of the gravel drive for almost 20 minutes. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, her heart caught between dread and hope. The cabin was ahead of her, weathered wood, a crooked mailbox with the name D. Green carved in rough capital letters. He hadn't changed it. She stepped out, pulling her coat tight against the late afternoon chill. The air smelled like pine needles and wood smoke. There was a single light on inside. When she knocked, it wasn't timid. It was steady. Footsteps. Then the door opened. He was older, of course. Gray streaked through his beard, and deep lines framed his mouth and eyes. But he was unmistakable. The same kind of eyes she saw in her reflection, the same way of standing, shoulders squared, but not aggressively so. Ready, but not demanding. Rowan? He said. She nodded. Hi. He opened the door wider.
You came. I didn't know if I would,
She admitted.
I wasn't sure what I'd find.
Daniel stepped aside. I don't have anything to offer except the truth. And maybe some bad coffee. She smiled faintly and stepped inside. The cabin was simple. Bookshelves lined with worn novels, a wood-burning stove, a table with 2 chairs, no framed family portraits, no awards, just warmth. She sat at the table while he poured coffee. Neither of them spoke for a moment.
I thought about this moment 1,000 times,
he said, setting a mug in front of her. And now that it's here, I don't want to say the wrong thing.
There's nothing wrong to say,
Rowan replied. You're here. I'm here. That's already more than I expected. He sat across from her. You look like your mother. I look like you. Daniel laughed softly. Maybe both. She took a sip of coffee, watching him.
Why didn't you fight harder?
His smile faded. Because I was 23. Because I didn't have a family name, or lawyers, or power. Because your grandfather made it very clear he'd ruin me, and I believed him. She nodded, swallowing hard. And my mother? She loved me, he said. But she was scared. And he was relentless. I told her I'd wait, but after a while I stopped hearing from her. I thought she chose comfort.
She chose survival,
Rowan said quietly. Like you did. They sat in silence for a while, the clock ticking softly behind them. Finally, Daniel reached into a drawer and pulled out a small wooden box. He slid it toward her. Rowan opened it slowly. Inside was a necklace, simple, silver, with a tiny charm that read RG. The engraving was faint, old. She touched it like it might break.
I had it made when you were born,
He said.
I was going to give it to you on your 5th birthday. I carried it for years, hoping somehow I'd find a way back.
Her eyes burned.
You kept it all this time? I didn't have anything else.
She put the necklace on, her fingers trembling. Thank you. When she looked up, he was crying. Quietly. With dignity.
I'm not here to rewrite anything, Rowan said. I just wanted to see you, to know you're real. I'm very real, he said, and I've wanted nothing more than to know you.
They didn't talk about the Altons. Not that night. It wasn't about them anymore. They talked about music and books and the kind of food she loved. He told her stories about the lake, about working at a garage up the road, about the neighbors who still brought over pies during storms. She told him about her plans for law school, about Caleb,
about her favorite poetry.
They were strangers, and somehow not at all. When she left the next morning, the sun had just risen over the lake, casting everything in gold. He walked her to the car and hugged her. Not tightly, not desperately, but like a man honoring a moment he never thought he'd live to see.
Come back when you're ready,
he said.
I will,
she said.
I promise.
Back in the city, life resumed. But it was different now. She finalized the launch of her nonprofit, the Green Foundation, offering scholarships and legal aid to young women seeking identity or autonomy after being erased by guardians or systems. The media picked up the story again, this time not as a scandal, but as a reinvention. Caleb came to the opening ceremony and sat in the front row. Juliet sent flowers, a card signed only with a heart. Marcus didn't come, and Rowan didn't expect him to. She stood at the podium in a cream blouse, no longer performing poise, just living it. Her nameplate read, Rowan Elise Green, found. Years ago, she told the crowd, I was given a name that came with expectations, but not truth. It took time, pain, and courage to reclaim the name that belonged to me all along. This foundation exists so that no one has to fight that fight alone. When she stepped down, she felt lighter. Like something buried had finally been unearthed and given room to bloom. Later that night, she sat on her apartment balcony, sipping tea, the RG necklace catching the city lights. She no longer needed to fit into anyone's legacy. She had made her own.